Hi guys, I am so far behind on Drakkenheim videos, so expect for the next few Mondays to have Drakkenheim Diaries. This session was on the 19th of May, and it is now September, so I know all the details coming up are not 100% because I also did not leave myself a very good summary. Until I get caught up with the Drakkenheim series, I'll be releasing these every Monday, and then it'll go to every other Monday, which will line up with when our campaign sessions are, assuming that we continue the campaign and we don't skip too many sessions. But we're getting back into it. So let's dive in. Our party decides that the Rat's Nest Tavern and, of course, the girl Petra are the most important mission on their plate at the moment. So they decide to head into the city, stepping back into that purplish haze that seems to be sucking the color and the life out of everything in the city. On their way through the city, they discover a group of bandits. This group is picking over the remains of what used to be a pharmacy. At first, they try to persuade them that they are just gonna move on past, but as they move away from the bandits, one of them goes, "That's right, you cowards." Morgan does not like this and instantly turns on them. Surprise, I know how to instigate a fight with my mom and her character. Bandits gang up on Morgan with axes and crossbows, trying to and succeeding in bringing her down in one turn, which was highly unexpected. Zelda decides to use a dust devil to blind the ones in the back as Nock brings Morgan back up. Delilah and Harmon quickly dispose of the others, and Morgan gets the final blow. They decide to look through the pharmacy themselves, and they find a small cache of delirium, which Harmon pockets without telling anyone. Then they take a short rest. They continue onward to the Rat's Nest Tavern. Harmon takes the lead, looking out for anything suspicious as they approach the tavern, but they see nothing. They make their way inside this dilapidated building and see that a small crater lies inside, one that has two very interesting features. One is the broken shards of delirium, as if someone has mined some delirium from this small crater. The second is the tunnel leading downward at a pretty steep angle. They decide to move to the tunnel. It's slick, very small, only fitting them single file through this tunnel. Morgan ties a rope and decides to lower Harmon down. He does not slip and fall, but at the bottom he does see a pit trap. All the characters roll well enough to avoid the trap, but still have to make their way across that pit. Harmon leaps over it, no problem. Morgan attempts to do the same, with problem. She ends up falling into the pit, but she does miss most of the spikes. But at the bottom, a swarm of rats comes up and start making quite a bit of noise. This causes other ratlings to investigate. Nock and Delilah rush down and aid Harmon as Morgan kills the swarm and climbs up using a rope that Harmon has let down. Zelda kind of struggles a bit with the fact that she cannot see in these tunnels as they are steep and she is up kind of at the top, so she can't actually see any of the fight that's going on. This was, of course, a learning opportunity for her as a new player, but she realizes most of what she wants to do she can't do without making the checks to see if she falls. She does succeed them and ends up using a fog cloud to obscure the vision of the ratlings. However, Morgan and Harmon are right there in the fray as well, and they can also no longer see. Some of the rats leave the cloud and attack Delilah and Nock, who both take care of them with relative ease. Zelda then decides to drop the cloud, and Harmon and Morgan deal with the remaining ratlings. They now realize that they are in some sort of ratling-made cave system. The group decides to move north, now trying their best to be stealthy, but as they round the corner, Nock trips, his armor clanging and causing more ratlings to appear from each direction. Luckily, Harmon has remained somewhat invisible in the front, so he's able to sneak up on some of the ratlings ahead and dispatch of one of them pretty quickly. Morgan comes bounding up behind him to deal with a few more, and Delilah and Noct handle the ratlings in the back, while Zelda shoots magic down the corridor to help Harmon and Morgan. This commotion, unfortunately, causes a few more to appear from down the way. At this point, the battle for me gets a little fuzzy. I do know that there were thorns that sprouted from the ground, possibly from Delilah, which helped slow down the enemy, and this allowed them to finish off the remaining ratlings, killing all but one. They instead knocked this one out and capture it, and they move this one back into one of the makeshift nests to interrogate him. They demand to know where the girl is, and the ratling is confused. Huh? They change tactics and instead ask about where they keep the fresh meat. The food storage, he says. Morgan is getting annoyed at this point. With intimidation, she demands that he answers which way to go. The rat is utterly scared. Either way, either way. Delilah is confused. What does that mean? Zelda then uses thaumaturgy to make her voice boom a little bit and says, "Tell us where the girl for food is." Either way, he cries. Tears are now streaming down his face. He's very scared. Noct pipes in at this moment. I think he means we can go either way to get to the food storage. And the ratling agrees with either way. And that is where we ended our session. If you like what you're watching, consider supporting me on Patreon, the best way to support creators on YouTube. You can get behind the scenes, plus you can get ad-free versions of my videos. Also, live streams, there's shop discounts, hopefully some paper products coming out, definitely a magazine in the works. There's lots of stuff there. Link in the description. Stuff I could have done better. So at this point, the random encounters were okay, but I didn't give the bandits any personality, and I honestly struggle doing that on the fly with any NPC. I think I just need to, for me personally, I need to get some general personas in my head to fix that portion of the roleplay. Morgan dying in the first battle should have been foreshadowing for the next session, but it wasn't. I'm also pretty bad at, I don't know if they're called this, but living dungeons, which is kind of what this one was. I think that the amount of noise that they were making should have probably brought more ratlings. I did a bit of that, but I don't know. I think, you know, the dungeon should be alive and things should be happening. I think I could work on that aspect a little bit. Also in this session, I realized that I hated my DM screen because it really did not have anything to help me. But I will do nothing about this until session 6. So there's that. The lack of a reliable DM screen, though, did make me doubt myself and doubt my ability to game master during this session. Since I had to take slightly extra time to look up specific things that weren't on the DM screen that I feel like I have to look up all the time. I might also be able to fix this by asking for the character sheets too, because they're all playing relatively new characters and helping them with their spells and stuff, especially since I've allowed them to use like Tasha's and Xanthar's and I can't remember the other one right now, but there's auxiliary resources that I'm allowing them to use, which offers more spells that I'm not as familiar with. Having their character sheet could help me with that, but at the same time, I'm like, I'd rather not have to look at their character sheets unless there's something wrong, if that makes sense. Like I already have enough to look at as a DM, right? I also felt like at this point, the campaign was not mine still until that rat encounter. I felt like not all ratlings would be good at communication or very, intelligent creatures. And that little interaction at the end was kind of the starting point for me making this adventure more my own. I don't lean into it for a while just because we end up taking a break. That was the starting point of me really making this campaign my own, and doesn't happen till after we get out of the Rat's Nest Tavern though. The hardest part of this session was actually dealing with the players. And it all kind of focused around the 10-year-old. However, the 10-year-old was not the one I had issues with. So the 10-year-old kept coming up with ideas and wanting to burn through all her spells and all of that, which to me, perfectly fine for 2 reasons. One, I think all new players kind of have to go through that. They start spending all their spells and then they realize, oh crap, I need to really ration my spell slots. But two, I think it's a DM's goal to kind of wear out spellcasters so that our monsters actually matter, right? The issue was that my sister and dad were a little bit too busy kind of telling the 10-year-old how to use her spells instead of just letting her make those mistakes. That also meant they were focusing on her stuff instead of focusing on their skills, which made their turns really long. So not only was there a big discussion every time Zelda wanted to do something, but then Delilah and Harmon took a little extra long with their turns because they were too busy helping someone else than preparing their own moves. So that made combat this time around an absolute slog. And I wasn't sure in the moment how to go about like directing this focus. This also put the 10-year-old in a little bit of an attitude because she was essentially being told she wasn't allowed to do the things she wanted to do. And I totally get why. She wasn't that way towards me, but she was definitely that way to her mother. And that kind of brings the air down a little bit. I kind of expected this to happen at least once or twice though at the table, just because, or more often, honestly, just because she's 10 and we're playing with a kid and she's not going to be able to get her way all the time, right? I did come up with something to counter this for the next session. So I put 2 different rules in place. The first rule is I actually introduced a timer. I actually have this little tiny sand hourglass timer from a different game. The problem is it's only a minute and I think that's too short, which I'll talk about in later sessions. When that timer runs out, their turn is done, whether they're finished or not. This did definitely speed up combat drastically. The second rule I added was that only the DM was allowed to help the 10-year-old with her moves, unless she decided to ask someone about a certain thing. If she asks another player and she explicitly wants their help, then that's on her. She can do that. I said that to me, the best way to help her learn the game and make sure that she's actually paying attention is to let her play her character and make mistakes. Try the things she wants to do and then suffer the consequences for those things. This second rule, they don't follow as much, but I think just bringing it up made the next few sessions way easier, and the next few encounters that they had way easier as well. 10-year-olds happier as well. And I think it all like settled down. I think it was just like us learning to mesh as a party with a kid, you know? But we will talk about how it got better in the next session. So for preparation wise, I know that I started looking at the chapel at this moment, as that was the next quest that they would have. And I can show my session prep notes for that. Unfortunately, this session was, again, May 19th. And this, right now, it is September 5th. This was also right before our summer break. We typically have to take a break in the summer because people are camping, I'm on vacation, I have conventions I go to. So I'm actually filming this in September and I cannot remember exactly what I prepped or what I was thinking about at the time to focus on for the next session, other than those 2 rules I mentioned earlier. I do know that I started looking at the other quests that I could hint at, but I didn't focus on them. Am I just a cat seat? I do know that I started, what did I say? I do know that I started looking at other quests that I could drop hints on, but I definitely didn't focus on them, mainly because I kind of knew that the next session would be pretty much just fighting the Rat Prince. And I also knew that they'd move on to the chapel next. So I didn't focus too much on dropping hints here. I know I prepped monsters and tokens though for the chapel as well, but that's all I can remember. So again, behind on releasing these videos, so expect some more every Monday for the next few weeks until we catch up. All right? We'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye. You weigh a lot, buddy. You're lucky you're cute.